Hi, Kamil.
Hi, Wojtek.
Maybe tell us what would be the step-by-step when we are choosing a display.
So first of all, I will focus, like in most of the devices, what size do I need? What kind of information do I need to show? When I know more or less my size, let's say it will be a 14-inch display or 7-inch display, or maybe 10 or 12-inch display. It really depends how much information I would like to show. The second thing I will look for will be a resolution. Do I need like a higher or lower resolution? Because in some of the sizes we can select more than one resolution. In case of Riverdi displays, most of them are high resolution displays, so we can show a lot of details. Then I will select high brightness displays for medical, and of course the industrial touchscreen to work with the gloves or like a water or some fluids on the screen. What is also important in medical devices, some of the applications require that the touch will stop functioning when there is a liquid on top. In, for example, outdoor application, when we have EV charger or maybe parcel terminal, we typically want the screen to still work with the water drops on the screen because we want to operate it. And if there will be some false touch, because the water can generate as a false touch or something, typically nothing bad will happen. Maybe the wrong button will be touched or something like that, but it's not the critical problem. But in medical cases, in some of the applications, there are requirement that if the touch detect the fluid on the screen, then the screen should block completely until it is wiped out and clean.
Okay, in order to minimize medical error.
To minimize the error, yes, because pressing the wrong button on medical device may be costly or maybe like dangerous for someone's life. So it's a little bit different approach, but it really depends on a device. And the last, what I would look for in medical device is longevity. It's how long this display will be available. In most cases, when we work with our customers on medical devices, we typically work maybe 2-3 years, up to 5 years on the project before it will enter the mass market. And then when it enters the mass market, most customers expect to manufacture this device for 10 years or even longer. So you need to select the display that will be very long available. That's the typical mistake. Mm-hmm. And on the early stages of the project, we don't think about this too much because we don't know if the project will be successful, etc. But later, if it is successful, we want to manufacture it. It's really, really good to remember and check this first. In case of Riverdi displays, we typically have more than 5 years guaranteed longevity, but for some components, we even have 15 years.
That's important, I guess, when you stock hospitals.
So
they won't change their equipment.
Not only that, but you still want to manufacture the same device. You put a lot of effort and cost to design it and then certify it, then market the device. So you want to manufacture it for, as I said, 10 years minimum, the same and the same and the same every year.
Okay, so because
the
service design
like that.
Costs
yes,
are
just
high.
Because design cost.
Mm-hmm. Okay, maybe you can share with us some use case, some situation with a customer in this field.
Sure, we have many examples that we either designed a new device with the customer from scratch, or we redesigned or we solved some problems. Yes, so maybe let's focus on the problems because they are more interesting. In one of the recent cases, we had a customer from US that was manufacturing the testing device, virus testing device. They have polycarbonate cover.
Not classic glass, yeah?
Yeah, not classic glass, but it was polycarbonate. And actually what they had also was the air gap in between this plastic cover and then the actual sensor. And then we had the stack. So we had the air and then we had plastic cover. And the company that delivered to them didn't understand this, that they are creating a huge problem. When we calculated the stack of the air and the plastic cover glass, which is way worse than glass in terms of electrical permittivity, then it turns out we are facing about 7, maybe 8 millimeter of glass.
You mean this permittivity is linked to touch capabilities?
Yes. Mm-hmm. There were no glass, but was air and the plastic, but we typically recalculate to the glass thickness, that equivalent. And the equivalent was 7-8 millimeter. And the controller...
So they had this little glass, but in fact,
yes,
in physical way, it was way thicker.
Yes, exactly.
So it was harder for them to use the touch screen, yeah?
Exactly. So air, for example, is like 6-7 times worse than the glass in terms of permittivity. So 1 millimeter of air gap is like 6 millimeter of glass. So it's very thick already. They had
huge
less,
difference,
yes,
yeah.
and then they have the plastic cover. So altogether 7-8 millimeter of the glass, but the controller and the sensor of the touchscreen they used was consumer grade, and this consumer grade controller could work only with 2 millimeter maximum glass on top. It couldn't
Consumer
work
grade
with- yes.
is a common mistake, I guess.
Yeah, it was a cheap display that they used. It worked. And actually, when they see that there was like touch problems, there was a little bit immune. I mean, not sensitive enough. They turned to the manufacturer, and manufacturer should tell them that you need to change the controller. We need to redesign, but it will be more expensive. Nobody cared about that, obviously. They just increased sensitivity of the touch controller to the maximum, to the total maximum, and the touch starts to work. But there was another problem. If you use the consumer grade and you put the sensitivity to maximum, in consumer grade controller typically cannot handle the noises. And then we jumped right into the false touch area. So
which we want to avoid.
You have to avoid it.
in medical.
yeah,
devices.
any device you want
Yeah.
to avoid it, and especially in medical. So they couldn't tune it right because this controller was not capable enough, and they had problems. It was a manufactured device already on the market. They generated huge problems for themselves. So when we look at that, we realized that the stack is completely wrong. We can keep the mechanical stack because we couldn't change it. They didn't want to remold the housing, etc. So we left the same stack, air and the plastic, but we completely redesigned the sensor and the controller to the industrial grade. That is easy to handle, 7-8 millimeter, and that was the solution. Yes, so for us it was pretty easy solution, but we needed to redesign it. It was necessary to retool everything, and successfully implement the new display.
Maybe we can summarize the main parameters for displays in medical devices.
When selecting the right display for medical device, as I said, I would start with the size, typical, then resolution, then interface, but it's like from electrical point of view, it depends on the system that you want to drive it. We have many interfaces in our standard products, so it's plenty to start off. Then I would consider high brightness display. I would say that 1000 candela IPS display with all the viewing angles. Right selection, then the touch is a must. You have to select the right touch screen. And again, Riverdi is prepared for that. Our standard touchscreens, in most cases, they can pass certification, or with the small modifications, we know what to do to pass the certification. So with a tiny customization. And then the last, longevity. Super, super important. You need to make sure that this display will be available for years to come.
So what the engineer or designer has to do to prepare?
I would go to the riverdi.com website, check the product list. There is plenty, about 300 standard models. So for sure, anyone will find something good to start off. Then I suggest to buy samples, test them. They should work with the medical gloves. But actually, if you want to start the project and it's a medical project, it would be very good to contact us and discuss with our experts, because maybe we will tune for you a little bit different firmware or change something in a design. And the earlier we do it, the cheaper it will be. Yes? So select the model maybe as a starting point, and second, please contact our team. Okay, thank you very much.